is Kar-Keat Chong. He's our piano artist for tonight.
Hi, everybody.
Kar-Keat was born and raised in the tropical city of Georgetown, Penang, Malaysia. He came to the United States in 1995 to pursue some undergraduate work. He was able to make use of his creative abilities in different avenues, such as rendering and designing build environments. And he is an architect, has his own business. After graduating, he worked in award-winning architecture firms, and he pursued his master's degree in architecture at the U of M. So he's a golden gopher like me. Today he runs his own art and architecture studio. In 2017, Kar-Keat decided to make time for his childhood passion again by conducting plein air painting sessions on his own and joining regular sketching outings with the Urban Sketchers Twin City chapter. His work has a realistic quality with bold, confident strokes in some scenes and soft, delicate strokes in others. He's a wonderful storyteller, so here he is. Welcome.
Thank you.
Take it away.
Thank you, everyone. It's very nice to meet you all. It's such an honor to be here. What a beautiful setting. I love painting outside because I really like to kind of take in all the senses and really experience like the wind, the light, and everything. And the best part about doing urban sketching for me is that I get to engage with people, especially when I travel. Like, always have a sketchbook, and people will come up to you and like, "Hey, what are you doing?" It's like, "Oh, sketching." And then they start telling you stories about that place, and you make new friends everywhere you go. It's wonderful. That's why I love to do that. I do some studio art once in a while. When I have jewelry exhibitions I like to enter, I'll do that in the studio. But most of the time I like to be outside doing plein air and doing a lot of sketching. And most of my experience really come with urban sketchers outings. So a couple times a month there's always some sketch meets, and I usually take advantage of that. It's a good time for me to kind of practice and get to meet like-minded people. It's really casual. If you haven't been to one, I encourage you to join the Facebook group or the blog page, and you can get all the notifications for all the outings. And it's all walks of life, people that just like to sketch and paint, and they're not full-time artists but just have that passion of sketching and painting. So today I'm just gonna walk you through a little bit of my process. I'm gonna start, and then I usually have a couple of passes, and I'll let it dry. While it's drying a little bit, I'll talk about the tools and take any questions you might have. People always have a lot of questions about the type of pens I use and what paper and all that. Today I'm gonna really focus on using this pea paper, and actually pea is Chinese, means skin. It's a paper that's made out of combination of mulberry and kozo. It's super tough. I will pass a few sheets around. You can get a sense of it. So there's two thickness that it actually comes in. This is like the single thickness, and then this is like a double thickness. I like the single thickness because the ink bleeds a little bit more. And I really kind of stumbled upon this paper while I was rummaging through my father-in-law's studio store. So some of you might know, but some of you might not know. I have a rock star father-in-law artist, Ching Chi. So some of you might know that. So every time I go to Duluth, I go through his store, and his personal store, and look for stuff. And he's like, take whatever you need, and And so he had all these stacks and rims of these pea paper just sitting around. And I was like, oh yeah, this is interesting paper. And I was looking for something that's not has as much sizing. The ink will bleed a little bit, and so I found this paper, and I started sketching with ink and with fountain pen. And what I really like about it is that when the paper kind of hits, when the ink hits the paper, it will bleed a little bit. It's almost like it records the whole process, like when you're thinking and when you're looking and when you pause and your stroke, the speed of the strokes, it all kind of really get recorded on the paper. You can see it very clearly if you pay a lot of attention. So I'll pass these around if you want to take a feel, get a feel of what that paper is. So I've been primarily working with this a lot, especially when I go out and do outdoor sketching. And it's just a really good way to record something really quickly and still has some texture to it. And I also like the idea that the paper, it's unlike regular watercolor paper, you can keep layering or you can wash. This you can actually take only a couple of passes before the paper start to get really soft and soggy and you'll tear over time. And the more you lay it on, you start getting a lot of kind of almost blooming on it, which is not very ideal. So I like the lightness of it as well. It's almost like if you flip it over, you can see the ink kind of telegraphing through. You have this kind of duality of the piece, some ink coming through, some's not. So it's a really interesting medium. So for my process, when I start, I usually, if I go out and doing sketching, I'd like to do something really simple with no pressure, just kind of warming up and don't feel like I have to do a masterpiece right away. It's almost like, because I don't sketch every day, I don't draw every day. It's almost like not often enough and as much as I like to, but I usually just do something really quick. Like if I'm out about doing a scene, I usually find something small to start. Like could be just a tractor, could be a piece of furniture, or could be a part of a structure, just to kind of get that going. So I'll start with that really quick. I kind of rough out a little bit. I was just kind of doing some testing on the paper and the angle and everything. So I had it started. So what I use a lot when I sketch with this pea paper is I use a bend nib fountain pen. And it's filled with waterproof ink. So when you do watercolor wash over it, the ink would not bleed. Later you can come up and see it actually has a 55-degree angle on it. So the nice thing about this is very versatile. Depending on how the angle of you holding the pen and to the paper, you can get variation, different line weights. And then if you flip it over and you draw it just on the tip, you can get really, really fine lines. And depending on the speed of your strokes, you can get different flows of it. You can see from the example flowing around that a lot of it's, when it's really fast, the line becomes really fine. And if you go slower, the ink is gonna bleed a little bit more. So I'm gonna kind of get going here, just do a really quick one. So like I said, when I'm out there, first thing is just do something really small, a little bit more casual, and I use a pack of these brush pens, and they're just in the values of grays from light to dark, so 5 values. So do almost like a quick value sketch, just kind of get a little warm-up sketch going on in terms of what the values that I'm going to be working with. Especially when with this pea paper, you can have, like I said earlier, you can have multiple layers that you can work on. So you only have a few passes, so your values needs to be really spot on. Also, one thing, a little tricky thing about this is that when it dries, it's quite light. It dries a little lighter than what you see when it goes on. Just like regular watercolor paper, it dries a little lighter, but this is much lighter. So you almost like need to get used to that mindset that you can use more intense color when you apply, and then when it dries, it's going to be a little lighter. So over time, you get used to it, and then you kind of know what to expect and what kind of value and what kind of color intensity that you need to use. So usually when I first start, I would just use the back, especially when I'm doing perspectives of buildings. I'll flip it around, so I'm sketching kind of upside down. So the lines are really fine. So it's almost like fade away. So really quickly, I can get a few perspective lines kind of going, and get all the big shapes down first. I'm basically kind of sketching this barn building and not focusing on too much detail like this. going on, get the rails, and again, this is quick sketch. I always remind myself that I'm not going to spend too much time on this before I run out of energy. So just get some really rough shapes, the big shapes. And with the sketchbooks, I always like to do the spread too. I just kind of let it flow over to the next page. I start on the left and just kind of work my way through to the right. So really quickly, I'm getting down some of these the branches and everything. I'm not gonna get, again, in too much details, just the big shapes.
So you always use just the one pen?
Yeah.
Different.
Yeah, and because the paper is semi-sized, so it soaks. It really the ink flows so much. Usually, I can get through a couple of sketches before the ink runs out. And then another nice thing about this is that it comes. It has a converter in it. So I usually have a bottle of ink with me, and then if it dries up, and then I can just refill it. It's also a nice thing about it is a little bit more sustainable. I'm not just going through plastic pens every time I sketch. So this is really, really nice. One thing about it is because of the platinum carbon ink, you need to give your pen some spa treatment every 2 months. If you use it a lot, I would say every month you probably should clean it out. There will be another time that we can go through all that stuff.
Is there a special cleaner you use?
No, it's just water. Yeah, so basically you just kind of refill it with water and then discharge it and just kind of keep going through that. And then it will basically flush out all the carbon in it.
And
So,
what's your favorite ink?
I use platinum carbon ink. It's a Japanese brand, and this pen is made by Sailor. It's also a Japanese company, and it's really inexpensive. It's like $15. So they come in two different angles. One is 55 and one is 40, I believe. There's a green one. So you need to hold it a little bit more in an angle, lower angles for the ink to flow. So 55 works for me. I like that angle, and I find that it's versatile enough to do that. So usually I'll just get some really quick line going, and then I'll come back, and then I'll just start to add some darker lines, some of the more defining lines on the structure. Again, keep it really, really loose, really fast. Thinking I'm trying to catch a bus here, so I don't overdo the details and everything at this stage. So you can get some of these larger window shapes in, the railing, and then a little bit kind of underneath the patio. So you can see, if you're behind me, you can start to see how much ink is coming out. Every time I stop, it creates a blob. And then as I sketch, the ink will just keep flowing. So at this stage, the inking part is, for me, at like a warm-up sketch, that's pretty much all I have. I don't include any more. So
Picture minutes.
very, very quick, get the big shapes down. And then I'll use my brush pens, and these are water-based, so you could actually use them with watercolor and use it to blend and without any issue. This is made by Talens. It's Ecoline, and what I like about these is that you can also buy refills. They come in little bottles with the eyedropper, so you can refill these again. Trying to be more sustainable with these. And I usually just go through start with the light and then go through towards the dark. So I will be just really quickly using this to do my value studies. So very loose, very quickly. There's a lot of light here on the face of the barn that's facing us. So I'm just using some darker colors, lighter colors to lay the first layer here really quickly. Some shadows coming from the trees, and the stuff in the back I usually just do it really lightly because I kind of want the values to kind of fade towards the back, just to suggest some depth and perspectival effect. So very quickly just do these. And then I'll just go to the next gray and then look at where I need some darker colors and start adding the darker values. Like these shadows could be a little darker. At this point, I'm not really doing a lot of the furniture up there on the patio, mostly just getting the big shapes down. This. So I try to be as loose as I can at this stage again, just trying to get some values down. So now I have almost like just two values, right? Still pretty light, very quickly. You can see it's starting to pop a little bit, right? Now I'm gonna go through and with a dark, even darker value, and start to punch out some of these shadow areas. It's almost like you're starting to train your eye to just look at everything in black and white. It's like, why is black and white photography so powerful? It's all because of the range of values, right? It's light to dark. If you really go through and work on that on your painting, you get a lot of your sketches, you can get a lot of values and make everything starting to pop in and out quickly.
Do you sketch every day?
I don't. Last time I sketched was yesterday. Archie and I went out to sketch down by the I'll show you what we did by the fall. So it was a really beautiful day, and that was like the first time in 3 weeks I actually gone out. Been working on a bunch of architecture deadlines, so it's been a little challenging, but take what I can get. So I'm going through again, building a lot of these values and getting it to be. The nice thing about it, it doesn't dry right away, so you could actually blend it a little bit. Get some texture here. I think this is always good to get some texture on these larger planes. Basically the standing seam on the roof.
Kar-Keat, I have a question.
Yep.
When you say blend, do you mean just blending your values together? Do you use your fingers to blend anything?
Actually, because the paper doesn't have a lot of sizing, so the colors are just still wet on it.
Okay.
So when I add more colors to the areas that I already shaded, it basically will blend and kind of bleeds a little bit, so it becomes almost like really soft. So I think at this point, I would say that this is good enough, and just very quickly, you can just get a bunch of the values and everything start to pop in and out a little bit, right? So I usually would do this a really quick one. This is what I did yesterday, with Archie. We were out in the river, and so again, really quickly warm up sketch, 15 minutes, 10-15 minutes. Very quickly, and a lot of times, again, like I said earlier, I wouldn't worry about how it's gonna turn out. I just draw. It's like, oh, this is a nice day. I'm just out drawing. I'm happy. Don't think about it too much. So this is, in a way, it gives me a sense of what I'm working with in front of me in terms of values. Sometimes I would leave it out or I'll reference it, but usually I just kind of put it on the side and I started working on what's in front of me, because I feel like this is like my warm-up study sketch. So in my mind, I kind of know what I'm working with, so I don't usually kind of leave it out too much, but I can leave this out for now. So you get a range of what's all the colors and the values that you'll need to apply. You know where the highlights are going to be. And always, I like to preserve paper white some areas where the highlight is, and then when you contrast it with some darker colors, darker values, then you'll start to pop a little bit more. I always think about like checkerboards. What my father-in-law always told me to do is like light, dark, and then vary your colors, warm and cool, and light and dark, and think about it as a checkerboard. And then you vary your shapes, so it becomes more thinking about design. Not so much about what you're just painting, but also switch over to more on the analytical side and think about design a little bit more when you do the work. So I always kind of try to remember all that, and when I do it, it becomes a little bit more easier. Just now, I just really quickly, as I was working on getting this going, again, like I said earlier, I used the back side of my pen where there's really fine lines, so I can quickly just get the rough perspective and the big shapes down. Some of you can see it, some of you might not see it very well. So you can see roughly the big shapes are all in. Composition wise, it works. It's not perfect. The big the barn part that's facing us is not right in the middle of the page. And again, the rule of thirds, everybody can understand that rule of thirds. Composition wise, where that's ending, it's really kind of more on the third of the page on the left side, and then it's kind of coming towards the right side of the page, and then this tree here is just going to stop our eyes a little bit from everything going out the page. So everything seems to be a little bit more frame and more composed. Then there's a little small, the green barn structure, the canopy, you see part of that a little bit here, anchoring on that right side. I kind of pull the tractor in a little bit so it's not really on the edge, just roughly rough the general shape of it, and then I can refine it when I ink it. Okay, so now since I have all the general structure of the building roughed out, now I can go in, and when I do this, it's also nice to have this first layer of really light pen work, because I don't draw every line that I see or what's in front of me on the structure. Sometimes when the areas when it's like on the back, sometimes I only ink the dark areas. So in a way, your mind is going to make that closure. You don't have to connect all the lines. It kind of leaves it a little bit kind of a mystery too. So sometimes I only ink and only draw stuff that's in shadow and reinforce it, and then there's some kind of almost like imaginary lines out there that's not super defined. So you can do that and just leave that out, and you can come back and use color to define some of those edges. But otherwise, I don't always just ink everything. Okay. Since I'm right-handed, I usually would start from the left and kind of work my way towards the right. And again, it's first pass. I don't want to spend too much time and too much detail also on the left side. I'll just kind of get a very good first pass on my ink going. And then if I feel like I need more line work on the side, then I'll add on to it later. So you can see I'm going to start with more slower lines like this. And I know I can't draw a perfect straight line, so I always like to vary my line weight a little bit as I go, so that it creates a more interesting texture and almost like a good line weight quality as I go through it. So I can see here that's a little darker. And again, I don't try to draw everything. Again, we'll try to create a impression, right, of what we're seeing. So don't feel like you have to document everything perfectly accurate, everything into the page. So
Is this the same paper as you were using before?
yeah. So what I usually do, these sketchbooks, I just tape the P paper to it. And same thing here is that I tape it to watercolor paper. And you can see there's some ink underneath it from previous work. So I just pull this off, and then I'll just tape new P paper to it and just keep using it in the back side. Sometimes I tape on the back side, so those are easier. So I just tape it, and sometimes like this sketchbook, it's a new sketchbook, I would tape the back with the rice paper or the P paper, and then the front I just leave it the typical watercolor paper. And this is a Hanemiel 100% cotton watercolor sketchbook. It's pretty nice, but again, too much sizing in my opinion. So I just use it more like for study purpose. Okay. So I'm going to start to ink these a little bit as we go. And from a perspective standpoint, you know, this is a 2-point, is like way over here, far on the right side, as the whole barn structure going that way, and then there's a little kind of a deeper second point that goes that way. And because it's all really out of the page, and I usually just kind of rough it in from what I see, and knowing that everything's going to taper that way and everything's going to taper this way. And I always, you know, tell my students like close enough is good enough. You know, you don't want to feel like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. What do I do? And so, you know, start with a really rough sketch, again, warm-up sketch. Try to get some of the general perspectival lines in place, and then do the structure, and then do the details. So it's better to start from big and then work your way in and hone in on the details. Then it's not so overwhelming. Yeah, so some of these lighter lines are essentially my guidelines as I ink it. So it helps a lot as I draw what are really the general structure and what I'm seeing. So I'm adding more details over here. I want to make sure I get these perspective lines going the right way. Right? Everything's tapering this way. There's a seam over here, so I'm just gonna go really lightly. And I always like start and stop, so you get a little bit of texture from from those lines, I can get the window in over here as well. There's a lot of standing seam going on. I'm not gonna do all of them. I'm just gonna do a few. Again, make it feel like there's texture there, but we don't want to overdo it. And another thing too, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use some of these gray markers to create some of these shadow lines on the standing seam of the siding here. So. Usually, when I start, I look back at the subject matter quite a bit, just to try to get, again, some of these details down. And then at some point, you almost like need to just focus on what's in front of you and not trying to mimic everything that's up there. Usually I would say when after the general ink work is done and then some light patterns that you see, and then usually I'll just try to focus on what's in front of me and finish it that way. So getting a little bit of that patio line. Again, I'm not worried too much about the guardrail at this point, just trying to get the fascia around the patio, which is kind of the more of the dominant shape anyway. So get that down, and then working my way around that. Again, I'm just sketching the general shapes right now. Once I get to a good point there, I will share with you what I have. So when I need some thicker lines, I just go a little slower with my pen, because then the ink has a little bit more opportunity to flow onto the paper. And sometimes I just use a bunch of reference points, like, okay, there's this post underneath the window. It's right about the left side of the first window on the first floor. I just use all those reference points to create my sketch, because otherwise it's really hard to figure out where all those different points are. So whatever I can do using the existing points to mark those as a reference to do my sketch. That's usually what I would do. The objects on the front, usually I'll do a little thicker lines to emphasize that it's on the forefront, and then everything else becomes a little bit more layered and fade towards the back. As the patio guardrail, it wraps around the corner. The pickets becomes a little bit more dense, so usually that's a good way to represent some depth and how it's turning the corner. Those are always a good way to show some of these conditions as they wrap around. So underneath the patio, obviously a lot of dark spots, so that's usually, if I have a range of values 1 to 5, 5 being the darkest, right? So that's what I would use to represent, and sometimes I would just use the pen to shade in some of those darker spots and basically create my darkest value right away with that. So when I color, I don't have to do as much of the darks again, because part of it, the color is always going to dry lighter. So no matter how dark I do it, it's always going to be lighter. So I always like to just use the ink to represent some of that dark areas and make those areas pop right away. We see a little bit of that stair in the back. And when I do the general outline of the perspective, I usually don't do everything, like the stair that you see behind the patio up against the main structure. I usually would just kind of sketch that in when I do the final inking. A statue over here. There's a guardrail. A fence piece over here. The ink, if you're using ink to sketch, it's going to do a lot for you. So when you're doing color, it's basically just give it basically some values and then colorways to make the objects pop a little bit. And otherwise, the ink is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting in your sketch. So that when you paint, you don't have to use as much color.
Kar-Keat, you have about 15 minutes left.
No pressure.
No pressure. Yeah, so I'm going to get a lot of these bigger shapes down. Tractor. Some of this detail, I'm going to go pretty fast. So very quickly, I'm getting a lot of this down. Some grass. There's some tables here. I'm just gonna really roughly sketch these in to give it something on the foreground. So sometimes when I do it, if it's not accurate, I would just kind of fix it. I mean, you see some shadow lines that wasn't accurate at the first place. I will just make those modifications as I do my final ink, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Sometimes when you go so quickly, you don't worry about it too much.
So when you're out with that Urban Sketchers group on site somewhere, how many usually are there?
The group has grown so much. Usually like 40 to 50 people would show up. Yeah. Yeah, so we've been having some issues about finding places where it's big enough, especially in the wintertime when we go indoors, that we could fit everybody. But it's been great that the group has grown so much. So this is kind of the inking part, right? So that's very quickly. You kind of get that down. So,
Are you gonna put some of your ink in also?
yep. So now I'm gonna
Whatever it's called,
watercolor.
No, but I don't know what those pens are called.
Yeah, now I'm gonna do some colors, some really quick colors. Andrea, if we go over, it's okay, right?
I'm sure we know. You need your line.
I'll be fast. I think
You're
we.
not gonna use the little felt, what are the felt things called?
Oh, these are brush pens.
Are they watercolor?
They are water based.
Water-based.
Yep, they're water based. Yep. So. Let's throw some quick color on. I'm using some burnt sienna on a warm tone, and then I'm using some ultramarine on the cool tone. These are like the most used two colors for me. I'm going to start on the main structure here. I actually like to mix the color on the paper to then you have this really nice range of color instead of perfectly mix of the two. I also really like this color from Winsor & Newton called Smalt.
Smock?
Smalt, S-M-A-L-T. Smalt Derman's Blue is what it's called. It's almost like this purplish blue color, and it's really great for shadows. It's really beautiful light pattern on the facade. From the shadows, and then I'm going and adding a little bit some warmer tones. This. I want to vary my color. Since I have some warmer color here on the side of the roof here, I'm going to use a little cooler color just to give it a little bit more contrast. And then I'll go back just to add a little bit of warmth to the side here. This. And then I'm going to come over here and just make sure I get enough value here for the shadow portion.
So have you always had a knack for like perspective and always sketching as far back as you can remember?
Yeah, I started when actively, I would say when I was 13, 14. Well, I grew up in Malaysia. It's tropical, so you can sketch all year round. And I always consider myself very lucky to be born and grow up in Malaysia because in Penang especially because there's so much history. Malaysia is a British colony, so there's tons of influence of colonial architecture, but then you also have influence from China and then regionally Southeast Asia. So, for example, like one street downtown, you have a church, you have a Chinese temple, you have a Hindu temple, you have a mosque, all on one street. So the variation of architecture that's there and just growing up, sitting on the streets and sketching those architecture, it's been really interesting to me, and I always feel really blessed that I had the opportunity to do that. And I always said that I'm an artist first before I'm an architect because I grew up sketching those buildings, and then I eventually, kind of got interested into architecture. And also part of it is like people tell me I can't make a living as an artist, so architecture was like the convenient profession. And now I'm back doing painting and everything. People are like, "Oh, so are you ever going to become full-time artist?" I said no, because being an architect gives me time away from painting and give me time to reflect on what I appreciate about art and also what I appreciate about architecture. So it's kind of a nice break. And then when I'm painting, it's a different world. It gives me almost again, opportunity to appreciate architecture by observing it and by looking at it at a different level. And taking pictures are always different than when you really stop and sketch and look at things, and you look at it a little differently, and you have a different level of appreciation for it. That's what I love, especially when you're traveling. Just kind of slow down and take it in, and really soak it in what's in front of you. That way, and like I said earlier at the beginning, people start talking to you, and then you learn all this other history of a certain place. Yeah, that's great. And Urban Sketchers, as you know, it's global. It's a nonprofit. There are like 350 chapters now around the world. So every year they do an international symposium, and different chapters will basically bid to host the annual international symposium. I've been lucky enough that I visited, I actually attended a couple of them, one in Porto, Portugal in 2018 and one in Amsterdam in 2019. So it was wonderful. You get to meet a lot of like-minded people from around the world. You have a lot of friends, and then you get to really slow down and really see a city at a different lens by recording them in your sketches. And I have I will have my sketchbooks here, so I can show you some of these wonderful opportunities I've got. Travel around the world and looking at different architecture, different culture, and experience at a different level. I'm still kind of laying down the first layer, just really general colors. Most of them is kind of the light, value 2 to value 3, which is like a medium value, right? And then we'll come back and then do the dark values later. So again, still laying down just the general color and then come back and
So, in
do
your
the value.
opinion, how much is passion and how much did you learn through school?
Painting through school, you mean? Or perspective? Or
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is passion, I would say. When I was growing up in Malaysia, I studied with 2 local artists in Malaysia. And it's outside of the school, and then I would go to one in the morning, and on a Saturday and go to another one in the afternoon. They have very different way of teaching. Both very, very great artists. Actually, one of them was my father-in-law's art teacher, but we're 40 years apart. So we have a lot of these crazy connections, and that I actually met my wife here in Minnesota is really crazy.
You met your wife in Minnesota?
Yes, and I actually met her through the profession because she was an interior designer. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like we have all these. My mother-in-law's family home is like 10 minutes walk from my parents' house. We found out that our grandfathers used to do business together way back when. So it's surreal, almost scary, surreal. Yeah, so I don't think I will be. I actually kind of stopped painting for a long time. After I came to the U.S., I just kind of got into architecture and trying to develop a career in design and architecture, and to be a really well-rounded designer and architect, you have to really put in the hours. So I was really into that, and fortunate enough to work with some really great architects that helped me become very well-rounded. And so I stopped painting actually for a long time. I mean, I still sketch some here and there, but not very much. And until I met my father-in-law, and he's like, "So, when are you gonna start painting again?" And he was very instrumental in terms of like getting me back thinking about it and everything. So I finally got back into it in 2017. I always felt like I shouldn't be doing anything else until I pass all my architecture exams and become a licensed architect. So I tried to do all that, and then finished it all within like 3 months. And then I started painting again. So yeah, so 2017, so about 7 years, and it's been really fun. I get to meet a lot of people, and I get to meet all of you. Opportunity like this is so wonderful. Yes, I really enjoy painting, and especially in a setting, and I get to do that last year at the state fair at the Artists in Residence program with Jim Clark. I got invited to kind of set up a studio there, and it was really wonderful.
Were you in the art building?
Yep, I was in the art building.
Yeah.
Yep. For one day, it was one of the hottest days. Hottest day. Saturday. It went by fast, but I really enjoyed it because I get to engage with the public in a different way. Because if you go and do painting with people, you're usually all like-minded people. But this is a lot of fun because I get to do it with the people that just kind of come to the fair and might not fully an artist or anything like that. So kind of the first pass color, getting some of these down. Get some color in here on the tractor.
So let's say you were designing this barn on this property, it wasn't here. Would you present the concept in this fashion?
No, in this day of age is mostly all digital. I usually would do some sketching front end and for myself in terms of when I'm developing the concepts and everything, because eventually you go into the digital world just because the way how things are set up now, and the expectation from clients and wanting to see more of a realistic form what that's going to feel like. So I feel like digital has really changed it. And once in a while when there's opportunities right with certain clients, if they appreciate more loose sketches on the front end, then I would do that. But otherwise, it's more like I use it for design exploration on the front end very quickly, site plans, and do that. I teach watercolor for architecture students at the U for the architecture school. I've done that for 3 years. I really enjoy that, and it's surprising to. It's actually really, really nice. There are actually still a lot of students that are interested in the kind of the analog way of doing it. So it's been fun for me to do that. So this is kind of the first pass. You can get a sense of the color. It flows quite a bit. You can see it gets a little muddy. Colors kind of flow into each other. I don't get too worried about it at this stage. I just kind of keep working on it, and then I'll let this dry a little bit usually, and then I'll go over with some darker values. Yep.
Smile. Your face is open. Jeez. Yeah, painting is the excuse.
So kind of the first pass, that's generally it. And like I said, sometimes I just use, with all the ribs on the building, I would just use this pen to help create those texture. And sometimes like here, I'll just go in and color that in really quickly.
If I might ask a technical question. So
Sure.
You wet your brush,
Yeah,
you sponge it off,
yeah.
you get more than one color out of a pan, and then you do something on the side. What is that last step? On your left?
Right here?
Yeah, there.
Yeah, so basically I just kind of blend some of those colors together.
Okay, is that water?
There's water and paint.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Hmm. Yeah, so I just kind of mix.
I just noticed that the pans,
Yeah.
the mixing pans on this side are not used.
Yeah, I don't know, creature of habit. Whatever the colors on the left, I mix it on the left side. Colors on the right, I mix it on the right.
It's a process.
Yeah,
It goes from right to left.
totally.
Interesting. That's smart.
Yeah, so in the studio I have larger palettes, so I have a little bit more mixing surface. But when you're out there in the wild, as I call it, I just kind of keep it a little more condensed. So I can just use the marker to create these texture, right, really quickly. I'm adding my value 3 and 4s into this.
So why did you do that in the inking phase?
Because I think if I use too much ink, then it will be so much it's too much ink, and then it gets too heavy. So I usually like when it's so, because I want the shadows and the from the light, everything to come through on that facade. So I want to keep a lot of that white area, and then only doing a few of these lines to get the texture represented.
Okay.
Yep.
You ever use white ink?
I usually don't. Sometimes, if I feel like it needs it, then I would. Actually, I kind of took them out of my
Okay.
palette, my case a while ago, and I was missing that yesterday. I was like, oh, it would be nice to have, but
It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
yeah, totally.
Okay, I'll just tell
So,
her that, Teresa.
what is your technique? I see a lot of dots on your straight lines.
Yeah.
You just do that out of.
And that is actually from the ink. When the ink touched the paper, when I, the moment I put the tip on the paper, it creates that blob. And then as you go, and then when I stop, the ink will flow again. So it's really the flow of the ink.
That's kind of the function of the pen.
Yeah, so it creates that kind of natural texture for me. And sometimes it gives a little bit more depth, like the value 5 areas. I don't have to do too much if I do a few points, and then your brain will make that connection very, very easily. So
I've always noticed that was a distinctive
yeah, and
thing
it's
that you do.
and that came from really the texture of the paper and the ink. So I'm really just going through and adding kind of the darker values here really quickly. Even here. See, I'm blending using my gray markers to blend with the colors. So I can do that to create the darker values that I need to make things pop in and out a little bit. It doesn't need too much, just a little bit here and there. Just a few over here to represent furniture.
What does that say on that?
You have to be enrolled in the School of Architecture to take the class.
For that class, yeah, because it has a prerequisite for architecture students only, and because it's like the only, they call it the font class. It usually fills up in 5 minutes, I was told. I'm not teaching it this fall. I kind of defer it to the spring. But I am teaching some workshops. I have one coming up in Winona at the Marine Art Museum in the fall. So it'll be a 2-day workshop. Yeah, so I think at this point, I feel like, it's strong enough. And it's got the values all down, some darker. I think this might need another pass of color so it's not so flat with the light and dark, but you get a sense of the scene a little bit. I'll probably color that in a little bit more, but yeah, thank you. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah.